You're listening to the Mindset Advantage podcast with Elliot Rowe and Dr. Tricia Cardner.
So welcome to the show. It's good to be back. Sorry for the break. Me and Tricia get pretty busy over the World Series of Poker, so it's not quite as easy just for us to do the podcast. So Tricia, how are you doing?
Doing great. I'm super excited to be back, and there's a lot of people that I hope we get the chance to interview. So we're going to have some juicy episodes coming.
Excellent. So you've been hassling everyone in Vegas for us.
I've been doing that as best that I can. I either take their money and or get them to agree to come on the show, sometimes both. So it works.
Just hustling, just a whole summer of hustling for Tricia.
That's right.
So what psychology news do we have this week?
Well, I'll tell you what. I talk a lot in my new book, Peak Poker Performance, about something called implementation intentions. And it's a way that you go ahead when you have a goal and you set up your plan. And so you basically want to say, if this happens, then I will do that. So if X, then Y. And basically you're making a plan, which is your intention, and you're implementing it. So a study came out, and it's called Too Much of a Good Thing. The benefits of implementation intentions depend on the number of goals. And this was in the Journal of Consumer Research. And the question that they were pondering and studying is, will that implementation intention work with multiple goals, or is it only just with a single goal? And so they ran a number of different studies with different types of topics and people. And what they found is that it is much more difficult to properly plan for and implement multiple goals. And this is not really a surprise, but there were several factors that kind of played into it. So I want to give people, if you have multiple goals that you're going for, I want to just give you kind of a few strategies that came out of this research that you can use that are going to make it more likely that you'll achieve it. Number one, you want to go ahead and choose goals that work together towards a common purpose. Because if you have all these different goals that aren't related to each other, it's very easy to just get overwhelmed. Like, well, what do I do? And I don't see how they work together. So choose the ones that go together. Make sure your goals are manageable, not like super, beyond your capability. That makes it a lot more difficult. And set concrete goals, not just the abstract. And I see people doing this all the time where they'll say things like, well, my goal is to be happy. Well, that's an abstract goal. We need to be real concrete. What specifically does that look like for you? And then make sure that the plans that you're making using the implementation intentions are loose and flexible, because when you're trying to go after multiple goals, it's really easy for things to get mucked up. And so you just have to be able to roll with the punches a little bit.
That's some very, very solid advice there.
I try.
On today's show, we've got Jonathan Little coming on. He's going to be talking about his summer, his deep run with his parents in the World Series, and some of the new products and websites that he's launching. And sort of speaking on the products and website side, I have finally finished my Improving Your Volume course for poker. And that's going to be launched any day now. So keep your eyes open on your emails if you're part of our mailing list for that. So let's give Jonathan a call. So Jonathan, thanks for coming back onto the show. If you could introduce yourself to our listeners who might not know about you.
My name is Jonathan Little. I'm a professional poker player, also an author and a poker coach, and I'm happy to be here. This is my favorite podcast by a mile, and I love it.
It's very kind of you.
And you are one of our favorite guests by a mile. So,
well, thank you. Everyone always asks me for poker podcast recommendations, and I say yours. So hopefully they're coming.
Yeah. So those listeners out there, they should be listening to you today. So you and Tricia have just launched a new book on poker psychology. So we wanted to have you on so you guys could talk to us about the book and what it's offering to the market.
Yeah, it's an exciting book. I'm honored to be a part of it. There's a lot of really good psychological information in there. And my job was basically to discuss everything that Tricia was bringing to the table, because she's bringing a lot of neuroscience and whatnot that most of us have no clue about. And I am applying it to the actual poker players. So Tricia can talk much more about all the technical side of things.
You know what, though, is interesting is that I feel like you are able to really kind of, okay, read what, I put in there, and I break everything down, and I try not to use like a ton of psychobabble or anything like that, but just break it down into like real concrete stuff. But then you actually in your sections talk about how you do the application. So I feel like it really reinforces the work that I did in the book.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly discuss how to apply all the concepts you're discussing, but I just go in and sort of reinforce it. It lists the ways that I'm already using these things, or ways I'm going to be implementing these things in the near future. And I think it's a great thing. I mean, poker is much more than just only sitting at the poker table and playing poker. You have to have your life in order. You have to, make sure you can play a reasonable amount of hours. You have to try to have a good life away from the table. And, being a good poker player is not that useful if you are not very good at life.
And where did this sort of go from? Because obviously we've got the first book, and this is the second in the series. Where does it expand? What direction does this one go in?
I don't know. I think we covered most everything. I'm sure Tricia can come up. Tricia can come up with more things.
Well, I feel like Positive Poker was really kind of laying the groundwork. And I had interviewed a number of poker players for my dissertation. The majority, all of them except for one, 7-figure winners in tournaments. And the one who was not is a female player, but who's, doesn't play that many tournaments, but who does have a World Series of Poker bracelet and has been around the poker world for a very long time. So based off of those interviews that I did for my dissertation, we turned that into Positive Poker. So there's a lot of excerpts from those interviews and just kind of talking about what was important. Peak Poker Performance is more the manual for how you actually bring your A game to every session. And it comes a lot more out of the work that I do in my private coaching and the work, that I do on the webinars that we do and that sort of thing. So there's a ton of exercises that students can do. And if you buy the book, there's a link in the book to a page on my website where you can actually download. It's like 40 pages of exercises that go with the book. And there's a couple extra videos on there, but it's a real how to set up your life, how to develop a clear vision of what you want, and just the step-by-step process. And as well, I talk a lot about the brain and how it operates and how you can optimize it and get it to be a lot more efficient. So I think it's quite a bit different than Positive Poker, actually.
One of the, I think, most important chapters for a lot of poker players is just creating winning habits. I think a lot of poker players get in very bad routines where they sort of sabotage themselves. I mean, if you observe what most poker players do after they bust a tournament, usually it's something pretty self-destructive. And if you can figure out a way to have good habits, especially after you bust a tournament or whenever things are going poorly, that's going to work out much better for you. So, you want to set yourself up for success, and Peak Poker Performance discusses that throughout the entire book, really.
And then how are you using all of this, the mindset information in your poker, Jonathan? So obviously you've been out in the World Series. How do you integrate this into the way that you play?
Oh, well, I mean, imagine I bust from a tournament at the end of the day, and everybody's going out to have drinks and party all night. I go to my room and go to sleep, and I wake up ready to play the next day. And I mean, that alone is worth a huge amount of equity, because you show up refreshed and you get to play the first few levels, whereas everybody else is just rolling out of bed then. So, I mean, that is a huge thing right there. And really, you want to make sure you're doing everything in your power to stay sane whenever you are at the poker table. You want to be playing your A game, which is another chapter in the book. And if you are just not focusing on poker and not paying attention, you're going to miss a lot of things. And I mean, I can definitely recognize the difference in my game whenever I am generally paying attention well and when I am not paying attention well. And if I can do anything at all in my power to make myself pay attention well, I'm going to do it.
And a lot of what Jonathan is talking about is, again, optimizing your environment and your behaviors so that you are able to focus more clearly and, pay attention and stay sane and all those things. So it really comes down to, as he mentioned, the habits, because success is built sequentially over time, and, it's step by step by step. And so if you crowd out your bad habits with really good habits, then you're going to have a lot more success, not just in poker, but just in life, generally speaking.
Right. So instead of going out clubbing all night, you go to your room, you have some green tea, and you watch a poker video.
Exactly.
And that's going to work out way better for you. Also, I mean, another thing, a lot of people at the World Series in particular, they will show up at the World Series and then be very uncomfortable in the environment. And they know what the environment's going to be. It's going to be cold. The chairs are going to be crappy. And you know that going into it. And a lot of people just like to complain, but they don't like to solve their problems. So if you fix your problems ahead of time and already know the solutions to your problems, you'll be able to focus better at the poker table instead of just being uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think there's a huge number of edges that, not even just at the World Series, but that players can take. A vast number of clients, when I first work with them, and I say, where are you playing online poker? And they'll tell me, oh, well, I sit with my laptop on my lap whilst watching TV, or I have my setup at my kitchen table, or I'm sitting on a bench while I'm playing, things like that. And in controlling your environment and putting yourself in a professional working environment is an enormous edge over your opponents who aren't doing that.
I totally agree. I mean, you want to be in the zone working your hardest. You don't want to be slacking off, having a beer and watching a sporting event while you're playing a bunch of tables. It's not going to work out so well.
Yeah, you wouldn't. It's so obvious, but there'll be a lot of people listening to this show who are thinking, well, I watch TV whilst I'm playing. Don't watch TV while you're playing poker. I promise you'll get some free big blinds per 100.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty strict about only playing poker when I'm playing poker, and that usually means no music, no TV, nothing. I'm usually just locked in a room by myself and only playing poker. And that works for me. It works out well. And I think a lot of other people who are watching TV and doing other things, it's like they've not trained themselves to focus well. They need a lot of distractions, and you don't have to have distractions. You can train yourself to not need those, and you can spend all of your focus on the most important thing at the time, which is hopefully poker.
Well, I think what you're getting at comes back to something that's very central to the book, and that's you have to have a very clear vision as to why you are playing poker. And I think a lot of people don't even consider that. So, if you don't have an overall vision, then how are you going to execute and, really get in that zone? I think that's very difficult to do.
Yeah, you always want to quantify what you're trying to do. And if you're trying to get drunk and gamble, then have your beer and play on the couch. But if you're trying to win money and be a legitimate professional, treat it like any other professional would treat their job.
I couldn't agree more. And then you guys were both out for the World Series. How did that treat you both?
Well, it went okay for me. I had 5 cashes, I think, in something like 15 tournaments. I played way less this year than I did in previous years. I tended to skip a lot of the smaller tournaments and played cash games instead. I'm having a baby in January, so I need to make some money. So I decided to play cash games. And I had a 13th and a $5,000 six-handed tournament and a 20th and a $10,000 six-handed tournament. But both of those only paid like $25,000 each, which was, it sounds nice, but it's a little bit unfortunate because you lose other $10,000 buy-in tournaments. So my summer was roughly break even. I think I lost some small amount, like $5,000. So that was fine. I mean, I had 2 really good shots at significant money. And I actually final tabled a tournament with my parents. They had a tag team tournament. It was a $1,000 buy-in. And I think they had something like 650 teams, and we ended up taking 9th. So I final tabled a World Series of poker tournament this year, and I got $3,500. So.
And you probably, I mean, you've got to be the only person in the history of the World Series to make the final table with your parents.
Yeah, I actually don't. There were a few teams that I talked to throughout the event who were playing, father-son or something like that. But I had both my parents on my team, and it was fun. I enjoyed the experience. It was actually a really cool tournament because everyone on everyone's team, especially deep, was railing them. So there was a huge rail of people who actually were very invested because they had played the stack some. And also, you really don't want to be the person to bust the stack. Like there was a spot on the bubble where I had something like 40 big blinds. I raised queen 9 offsuit for middle position. A kid who had been, in line enough, but he had more chips than me. He re-raised to something like 7 big blinds. And it gets back to me, and I'm thinking if this was a regular tournament, I'm just all in every time. And then I see my mom and dad over there, rail, like, praying that I don't go broke and we get in the money. And so I folded. And, that's just a spot where in regular poker, I'm probably all in. And I don't know, maybe you give up a little bit of equity because you don't want to be the one to bust a stack.
I'm wondering, just for people who don't know, how did it actually work? Like, how much of the time did each person on the team have to spend playing?
It was kind of a bad set of rules, in my opinion. Every person had to play at least 1 small blind and big blind, and that was it. So you could play legitimately 2 hands. But the way we did it is I actually played for the first hour of the tournament, and then I had to go play day 2 or 3 of some $5,000 tournaments. So I wasn't even really expecting to play much. But so I played for the first hour. Then my mom played for 2 or 3 hours. Actually, my dad played for 2 or 3 hours next. And he got up to something like 7 starting stacks in the first 4 hours. He just won every hand. So then my mom played for a while. Then I played a little bit more. I think I ended up playing maybe 12 hours. I think my dad played about 8 hours and my mom played about 4 hours. Okay. And my mom was the one who won all the chips for the most part. She would sit down and win all the chips, and then we would tap her out, bluff off her stack, and then
she'd come back and reload for you.
Now, Jonathan's mother, his mother and father are the sweetest, most fun people I've ever met in my life. And I've been fortunate enough to meet them several times. But your mama told me that she really doesn't like full ring poker. She likes heads up because she likes to play a lot of hands. So did you notice that she was playing a lot of hands in this tournament?
She was pretty well behaved in the tournament. I think the same thing factored into her mind too. She didn't want to be the one to bust us. But I mean, every time she sat down, she was playing way more than her fair share. So I guess she was. She didn't want to tell me all the hands she played. So maybe some of them were a little bit out there.
And do you find it sort of affected your mental game at all? Was it just a fun tournament for you, or where you take, you're starting to get close to the final table, does it suddenly become very serious? Because there is a bracelet on the line, and it is just an amazing story if you do manage to win that bracelet with your mom and dad.
Well, we would have gotten 3 bracelets, one for each.
Oh, 3
That's right.
So for me, it was effectively all for fun because it was a $300 buy-in tournament for me. It was $1,000 per team, and you could have between 2 and 4 people. It's up to you. We had 3, so it was $333 each. And maybe if I won, I'm trying to think. I think I would have gotten like $50,000 if I won, which is good money, but it's not like $1 million, right? Yeah. So, but at the same time, I realized $50,000 is like what my parents make in a year, so they would be thrilled to win. So I almost felt like I brought my A+ game, and I played about as well as I could. There were a few spots where I made pretty big folds and also pretty big calls, or I'm not sure I would have made them if I was not paying very good attention. But knowing that I'm effectively playing for my parents and their livelihood to some extent made me do my absolute best.
No pressure.
Yeah, I mean, like if I bust a tournament, I just don't care. But if my parents lose out on their $50,000 bonus for the year, that's pretty brutal. Unfortunately, they did. They ended up getting $3,500 each or whatever it was.
But they still have the opportunity to say that they have made the final table of a World Series of Poker event. And not a lot of people can say that.
Yeah, my mom has 1 tournament played, 1 cash. It's a final table. What more does she want?
What more does she want?
Her hand-on mob looks excellent then.
Yeah.
So if they do a team event again next year, will you and Mama and Papa Little play again?
If we're both out there again, we will. I don't really know my schedule because I'm having a son in January, so I may not be out to the World Series, except for just the main event, maybe another tournament or 2. But we'll see. We'll see how life is going. I kind of have been working hard to set up my life so that I can stay home at least for 6 months, and maybe for like a year and 6 months or something like that. But we'll see. If they have the tournament and we're out there, we will definitely play.
And now with the baby on the way, I do get quite a few poker players talking about, having their first child. How does that affect things in the way that you're viewing your career as a poker player? Has it changed things a lot in the way that you're viewing next year? Are you just going to take it as it comes, or do you have a game plan in place?
Well, my general plan has been getting screwed up a bit because they have this Zika virus, and you can't go anywhere where they have the Zika virus, at least in my wife's mind, because the Zika virus will mess up your baby. So EPT Malta is coming up, and I was planning to go there. That was going to be my last big poker trip. I believe it's in the end of October. And I was going to stay home for November and probably December, although maybe I was going to go to Bellagio. But there, they have a bunch of mosquitoes. Last year, I got bit up. So I'm probably not going to be going there. The odds of getting it are incredibly low. But at the same time, if you get it and give it to your baby, you'll never forgive yourself. And that would be a disaster. So I'm probably going to play a little bit less than I wanted to for the rest of this year. And next year, I'm just not going to play at all until at least the World Series. I want to stay home. That's what I want to do with my time. I don't really want to be off playing poker for some amount of equity when I could just stay home and be with my kid.
Isn't it amazing that poker can offer you that opportunity to set your life up that way?
Yeah, well, I've been planning ahead for the last few years to set up this scenario. I recently just launched a new poker experience. It's at pokercoaching.com. And I have a bunch of people in there who are learning poker, and they're paying a subscription fee, and that is going to allow me to stay home and really focus on that as effectively my main job. Poker coaching is effectively 2 main parts. The first part are interactive hand quizzes. So each week we post a few quizzes, and you go through, and if you all have ever played the Instapoker training app, which I'm also part of, it's similar to that, where you're offered some choices. You pick a choice. You're graded as to whether or not it is a good choice, a medium choice, or a bad choice. Actually, it's on a scale of 1 to 10. And then over time, you can see where your game needs improvement, and you can really work hard to fix those spots. Also, I'm going through and analyzing everything with video and audio, so you can hear my analysis for all those situations and all the decisions. And then also, we have a monthly homework question. And the most recent one, for example, is everyone folds to you in the small blind with 100 big blind stacks early in a tournament. The player in the big blind is a very good world-class player. What is your strategy with each part of your range and why? And that's a pretty big question. And these questions force the students to really think about this aspect of their game. And that's something that a lot of people just never do. They just kind of show up and they look down at their hand and they have Queen 7 suited and they pick a play. So forcing the students to think about all these scenarios that actually do come up pretty often is very beneficial. And then I go through in a webinar and I read through all of the homework answers, and I effectively, I grade them and let the students know if I think that their answers are good. If they're bad, I give my answer that I think is optimal, at least today. And so far, the students are loving it.
Excellent. So sort of a new type of coaching experience then, rather than just the traditional, watch a video of me play site that is usually out there.
Yeah, well, we have been trying to make poker learning more interactive for a very long time. So all the poker sites used to just be, here we have a forum and some videos, have at it. And I've moved away from that when I started doing webinars. I was one of the first poker instructors to do live webinars, and those have been going great. And I realized that people really enjoy one-on-one attention, but they can't really afford to pay for one-on-one attention with a world-class poker professional, right? Because it's, private coaching is expensive. I normally charge $300 per hour for private coaching. But if you can sign up for a year of poker coaching for less than the price of an hour, a lot of people are thrilled to do that. And we're just trying to figure out ways to make learning poker more and more interactive and engaging, because that's how people really learn. You don't really learn from just sitting back and observing someone playing. I mean, you do learn a little bit, but you learn a lot faster when you're actually in there clicking the buttons, thinking about the scenarios, and
having to explain yourself as well. Like you said, why are you playing the hand that way?
Oh yeah, every question ends in, what do you do and why? Because I just don't want you to just give me a bunch of ranges and say, here you go. I want you to explain why you're doing this with this part of your range and how you're going to play if your opponent 3-bets you, etc. So, I mean, from the small blind, you need a limp folding range, a limp calling range, a limp re-raising range, maybe a raising range, a raise folding range, a raise calling range, a raise re-raising range, etc. So it gets broken down into a pretty nasty spot once you really start thinking. And we're actually taking that one step further. We just launched this thing called the Inner Circle at Poker Coaching. I believe you can go to pokercoaching.com/inner circle. And that's going to be office hours where basically every month I'm going to sit down for 4 hours and get on the line one-on-one with the students and discuss whatever's giving them problems. And I mean, you can really help people out if you talk even for like 5 or 10 minutes with them. If you hear their problems and you can solve 1 or 2 of those problems each month, that is incredibly significant. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
From a peak poker performance standpoint, what you're really doing is you are re-envisioning poker and the study of poker, and you're really bringing a lot of deliberate practice to it, which I always talk a lot about, whether it's my webinars or the books. If you really want to excel and learn poker, you have to do deliberate practice. And that's what I feel has been missing from a lot of the other coaching programs. And now the way you're describing this, I think it's really going to hit that nail on the head.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, ideally, you would be able to have me sit next to you and explain everything you're doing every single time you're playing a hand, but that's just not so practical. And this is pretty much the next best thing in my mind. And I'm excited to be a part of it and excited to be the one making it happen.
And then, as you say, this is going to be the main job for next year. You said until the World Series. Is that a 6 months break you're giving yourself, or do you think that might then extend and it might be 2018 when we see you sort of playing around the world?
Well, it could be. I mean, it depends on how much I like my kid.
I'm sure you'll like him a lot.
I mean, if he's a jerk, I'm going to be out of there in about a month. But if he's nice, I'll probably stick around for a while. But I mean, we have family here in New York where we live, so I'm allowed to go take poker trips. It's not like I must stay home. So I sort of envision myself maybe going to the EPTs. That's where you can get in a lot of volume whenever you go to play for a 10-day period. So I'll probably play most of those and maybe just sporadic tournaments at Borgata and places that are somewhat local. But I really don't know what the plan is in terms of actually playing poker. I do know that I'm committed to pokercoaching.com at least for a year. We sold year-long memberships. So at least for a year, I'm going to be very committed to that. And we'll see what happens in poker. I mean, I'm still going to play a decent amount until roughly the end of the year, this year. And next year's a mystery.
And as far as, writing goes, you're like one of or probably the most prolific poker writer at this point. Do you envision any more books coming down the pike?
I have a book discussing how to increase your levels of aggression coming out as soon as we get a cover made for it. So
nice.
I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be called Bluffs. Very simple. And it discusses a lot of situations where you could be bluffing that you probably aren't. It goes through a lot of fun bluffing lines that I think are good. Actually, the way the book came about is one of my students studied one of my webinars on bluffing. And he went through, outlined everything I discussed, and then decided for like 6 months, he was going to really try to run all these bluffs every time he had the opportunity and see if they actually work. And sure enough, he started winning all these online tournaments. He final tabled a mid-states poker tour event. And he actually made a deep run in a $2,000 tournament this year. So he has something like 100,000 in cashes now over, just playing recreationally by going through, picking up these 15 or so concepts and just really getting after it. And that turned into a book. So I'm excited to bring that to you all.
Wow. Well, so when can we look forward to that?
Probably in about a month or so, if I had to guess, but we'll see.
Okay.
Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Jonathan Little. I'll always be posting about everything new I have going on.
And is that an actual physical book or is that an ebook?
It is going to be both physical book and ebook. You can now self-publish books. It's going to be a self-published book. I'm going to make an audiobook version of it. And if you make an ebook and just put it on Amazon, they have a site, a sister site that will allow you to print on demand. So they have all the options available.
Excellent.
And actually, as it happens, I'm going into the studio next month to record Peak Poker Performance. So that will be available as an audio. Right now, it's paperback and Kindle, but the audio is coming.
Audiobooks are great, actually. I definitely suggest everyone give audiobooks a try if you never have. I mean, I guess if you listen to podcasts, you'll like audiobooks. That's what it amounts to. So if you're here, you'll probably like them. So give them a try.
Yeah, it saves you having to read.
Well, I think they're nice because you can be listening while you're working out or you're cleaning the house, doing chores, things like that. Whereas maybe you wouldn't be able to sit down and read a book, and you can listen, as many times as you want. So, it can really get in there.
I find them great for the running machine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I listen to audiobooks in the gym, and I actually have had a bunch of people come to me and say that they are so happy that I made the books an audiobook because they just don't like reading, or they don't have time for reading, or they have a really long commute every day and they can't read on the bumpy train or something like that. And that's great. I mean, audiobooks are fantastic for some people and just good for everyone else.
Well, we like to give all the choices. So we try and, make our books available in all the formats.
Yeah, make sure all bases are covered.
That's right.
And Tricia, how did your World Series go?
I had a good time. I ended in the black a little bit. Obviously I didn't win millions because I'm back here, podcasting.
I'm sure you'd still come back. You'd have to come back at least once and talk about it.
Of course. At the end of the series, they do these mega satellites, and I played one. So it was like a 565 or 575 buy-in. I can't remember exactly, but something in that range. And the top people, you get 10,000 in Lammers plus 100 cash. I guess they give you that because they think you'll tip or something. But I played one of those, and it had almost 600 people. And so the top 27, I think it was 27, got the seat, and 28 got $2,000. And then everybody else got a fat lot of nothing. So in Excelling at No Limit Hold'em, I've said this before, I've read the whole book, of course, but I've read Bernard Lee's chapter on satellites several times. And I always read it before I play a satellite, just to really, get my mind primed for what I need to do. So I did that, and I went in, and I'm happy to say that I did get one of the seats, but I went ahead and I sold the Lammers and just took the money. So I was happy with that.
Very well done.
How are you going to win the main event if you sell the lammers?
Well, here was my thinking, Jonathan. My thinking was I want to put the 10,000 in my pocket, and then I was going to come back the next day and play another satellite. And then if I got that, the second seat, then I would play that one. So I did execute my plan. I came back the next day and I played, and a guy raised it up in early position. And in those mega satellites, for people who haven't played, you start with only 4,000 chips, and it's 30-minute levels. So it goes fast and furious. So we're in about level 4 at this point. So guy raises, I have aces. I flat him to induce behind. A guy behind goes all in. It makes my wish come true. The first guy goes all in, makes me even happier. So then, of course, I put all my money in. I have aces. One guy has queens and the other guy has kings. And there was a king on the flop. And that was the end of that. So that's why
no bad beat stories. No bad beat stories.
Now, had I got that seat, I would have played the main, but I just like having some money in my pocket. So
yeah, I actually think satellites are not a good idea for the vast majority of people, because typically what happens is you play a tournament that you are properly bankrolled for, the $500 satellite or whatever it is, and then you get 10 or 20 times that amount. And all of a sudden you're going to go play another tournament, which is now equal to the rest of your bankroll or something like that. And you just end up gambling really hard. So again, it goes back to your intention when you're playing poker. If you're trying to gamble a little bit hard and get rich, then it's a perfectly fine strategy. But if you're trying to treat poker as most professionals do, and you're trying to grind it up slowly but surely, and eventually get to where you can just buy into $10,000 tournaments, no problem, you're probably better off taking that $10,000 and putting it back in your pocket. So that's probably a wise decision.
That's what I did. Yeah.
And I think that's something that happens a lot is people satellite into these bigger tournaments, even online when it's outside of their normal bankroll. And just the amount of money up top becomes so stressful and so significant that it's much harder for them to play their best poker. So I think sometimes it can put you at a bit of a disadvantage if you go into these and it's just so wildly outside your normal game.
And also, or go ahead, Tricia.
I was just going to say what was really interesting is the people that were playing when we got down to the final, few tables. I don't want to tell tales out of school, but the majority of these people, they had zero chance, I think, because like you guys are saying, it's so far out of their comfort zone. It's so far out of just, they're recreational players and, they kind of have this dream and blah, blah, blah. But I was asking people on my table, are you going to sell the lammers or are you going to play? And they were, I'm going to play. But, they weren't really, for a variety of reasons, psychologically prepared or strategically prepared. So it's something for people to really think about before they do it.
One other thing that's just really important is that the goal of a satellite is not to win the tournament. The goal of the satellite is to get in the money. Whereas the goal of a poker tournament, a regular poker tournament, is to win the poker tournament. And if you're playing a 5,000 person tournament, you have to get in the top, 9 or something like that to make significant money, which is a very, very tiny percentage. Whereas in a satellite, you're trying to get in the top 10 or 5%, which is a very, very different goal. So that's why you see a lot of people who actually do really well at satellites do horribly at regular poker tournaments, because the goal is different and they don't adjust properly. So you have to realize the games are very different. And if you are using the same strategy in both, you are making huge errors.
I actually saw people in the satellite playing it more like it was a tournament. And, I saw people when we got around the bubble that could have easily folded their way to a seat, who just took very unnecessary risks, I think, because they don't understand proper satellite strategy. So that thinking goes both ways.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, all this is discussed in Bernard Lee's chapter of Excelling at No Limit Hold'em. That's a book I wrote with Elliot and Tricia and a bunch of other poker professionals. And I actually learned a lot from that chapter as well. There was a formula in there to tell you roughly when you will get in the money in a satellite, plus or minus a level. And just knowing that is humongous, because if you know you can blind out for 2 levels past where you're obviously getting in the money, then you just know you're a lock and you don't have to play any more hands.
Exactly.
All of these tips in one podcast.
I mean, you're getting the mental game, you're getting poker strategy. You can learn how to get deliberate practice through jonathanspokercoaching.com. What more do you want?
It's a good podcast. I tell everyone to listen to it. I mean, it's true. It's the best podcast out there.
And Jonathan, where can people find out about you? So pokercoaching.com, and then where else?
On Twitter at Jonathan Little. And then also I have my personal site, jonathanlittlepoker.com. Every week I post some sort of an educational blog, either an article or a video blog or a training video of some sort. And then I also have a podcast there called Weekly Poker Hand, where I go through a poker hand every week. So check it out, jonathanlittlepoker.com and pokercoaching.com. If you want to get better at poker, I think pokercoaching.com is the way to do it.
Perfect. And then Tricia, where's the book available right now?
It's available at Amazon.com, of course. D&B Poker, you can get it on their website if you like. And I've heard people say that they're seeing it out in Barnes & Noble. So you may even check your Barnes & Noble.
Out in real life. And what's the name of it again, just for everybody?
It's Peak Poker Performance, How to Bring Your A Game to Every Session by myself with Jonathan Little.
Oh, very cool. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for coming back on the show. Congratulations on the baby news. And we'll be catching up with you soon.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here, and I look forward to listening to all the future podcasts.
Perfect. Bye-bye. So always nice to have Jonathan on the show. Just tons and tons of information there.
Oh, my goodness. He is a fountain of just knowledge. Just that well goes very deep, I think.
Yeah, I think it really helps that he spent so many hours writing the books and working with students and making the videos that, I mean, he's done the research, hasn't he?
Oh my gosh. He's like the hardest working man in poker, I think, next to you, maybe.
No, I don't know. He works even harder than me. I think hour for hour. I work pretty hard. I do a lot of hours, but I think Jonathan, in terms of those books, I mean, he's produced a lot of them, and obviously the massive Excelling project that we were all involved in last year. I'm sure he had a lot of emails to write and a lot of phone calls to make to get all of us guys to finish their chapters for that one.
And it was interesting because we did Peak Poker Performance. And obviously, we completed it months before the World Series. But, I would just send him the chapters and he would, read what I had written. And then he would write his section and send it back. And he works really quickly, which is very nice. And then, I would edit or make my comments and we'd kind of go back and forth. But I feel like doing that process, it just elevates, everything that I put out. So I really enjoy working with him.
That's really cool. And obviously, I think his idea for the new website, having people actually doing homeworks, having their work critiqued by him as well, is a very good way of actually keeping you accountable. If you are looking to get into live or online on MTTs and you want someone guiding you, I mean, what a wonderful way to be, taken through that process.
I was just thinking, though, it might trigger some fear in some people, if they know that their homework is going to get graded and they may be shown to the class. Well,
I know a good hypnotherapist if you're out there and you're just struggling.
Exactly. You've got to get over that fear because that's the only way to get better is to do some deliberate practice with a wise teacher. A
mistake is a good thing because it means you have a chance to get better. If you're always right and you're not winning, there's a problem. So it's the mistakes. You want to find the mistakes. So it's always a good thing if someone points them out.
Exactly.
So Tricia, where can people find out about you and your stuff?
You can check out my website, which is drtriciacardner.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Tricia Cardner. And you can find my books over on Amazon and they're at D&B Poker as well. And that's all I can think of off the top of my head.
And that's all. Okay, well,
that's all.
And if you're interested in finding out about my coaching or products, just head to pokermindcoach.com. Thank you all. We will be doing the podcast more regularly again now. Again, apologies. It's the World Series of Poker for us. It's a crazy, crazy time. But back to normal life, real life, unfortunately. So these will be coming up with much more frequency. So I hope everyone had a great summer and looking forward to talking to you soon.
We'll talk later, guys.
You've been listening to the Mindset Advantage podcast with Elliot Rowe and Dr. Tricia Cardner. To get any resources mentioned in the episode or to listen to past shows, visit pokermindcoach.com/TMA podcast. Thanks for listening.